Hello and welcome to the Sports Grad Podcast. My name is Ruben Williams and usually I'm always joined by my great friend Ryan Walker. However, today Ryan has headed up north to the Gold Coast to attend the Women in Sport Summit hosted by Ministry of Sport. So you've just got me today. I hope that's all right. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. I'm feeling a bit lonely in this room by myself, but we have an incredible chat coming up for you very, very shortly. If you are new to the show, myself and Ryan, we're two mates who met working at Cricket Australia together, and now we run this podcast so that other people can get their dream job in the sports industry. So you might be trying to find your first job in sport. You might be 15 years into a career in another industry trying to find a job in sport. Whatever it is, we've got guest interviews and tips and tactics on how to make that jump into the sports industry. So, and today we've got a stellar guest in Kerry Gassner, who I'll get to shortly. But if you want to follow us, we're quite active on LinkedIn. Head over to there where you can connect with us. Please send us a message. We always love a personalised message too. If you're going to connect with us too, tell us if you've listened to an episode. But we also run a great community called the Sports Grad Community. Now, this is for people who are serious about connecting with others in sport, who want to learn from like-minded people, all pursuing a similar sort of goal. If you want to join our community members, there's over 400 of them hanging out on Discord. And those people are joined by over 40 organisations in the sports industry who are inside to hire these people. Now, together they've been able to create over 240 jobs for people in the sports industry. So jump over to that if you want to find a job in sport. Speaking of jobs in sport, one of our favourites has recently got a job in sport. His name is Brant Hubber. He's recently got a job at the AFL as the Commercial Partnerships Coordinator. We absolutely love the journey that Brant has been on. We're going to have him on the show next week, in fact, just to kind of hear about what he has done to make that jump into a dream job. So well done to you, Brant. But if you like the AFL or if you like Brant and you want a job in sport, you want to grow a career in sport, check out the Sports Grad Community. There is something in there for everyone, no matter if you're job hunting or if you're hiring or if you're just trying to get that next promotion. So www.sportsgrad.com.au/community is where you can find all the details on that. Now, Deakin University has been a huge supporter of SportsGrad since day dot. And if you're currently studying or you've just finished studying, having a post-grad qualification in sport management on your resume can give you a huge leg up over other potential candidates who are applying for the same role. So if you want to pump up your resume and get specialised knowledge in sport behaviour, law, marketing, ethics, finance, governance, you name it, Deakin University's postgrad Master of Business in Sport Management is not one of, but the best in Australia, ranked at number one. So add a postgrad qualification to your resume, and that's our quick tip for this episode. Now, on to our guest, Kerry Gassner. I'm super excited to introduce you to Kerry. He is a phenomenal person, and here's a bit about his background. So Kerry's very different to a lot of the guests that we've had on this show. Kerry started out his career as a truck driver, and he was driving trucks around the country for the first 7 years of his professional life before he followed his father's footsteps into the police force. And he spent 15 years in the police force, working up the ranks into detective, sergeant, that kind of thing, and was on a very steady path to being there for the rest of his life. It's very comfortable. They look after you for a long time. And after a while, he got a bit of an itch. Someone opened his eyes to the potential of working in sport, an area that he loved. He's got a good background in baseball and coaching as well. And he ended up making the jump into the AFL and worked in the integrity department there. After 5 years of a career at the AFL, he then moved over to venue management at Kardinia Park down in Geelong, where the Geelong Cats play all their home games. And as you'll hear, also host stellar concerts such as the Foo Fighters, of all people. Since then, he's jumped over to the Melbourne Olympic Parks Trust, or M&OPT, if you hear it referred to as that, where he is the venue manager of John Cain Arena, which sits alongside Rod Laver Arena. These are the two premier courts of the Australian Open, for those wondering. So Kerry is an amazing guy. He's had an incredible journey, a very untraditional journey, but one that I think will help a lot of people if you're trying to make a jump from one career into another, or if you're just looking for advice on how to grow a career as well. Kerry's got some stellar pieces of wisdom. Now, a couple of things to look out for. Kerry talks about the fact that you need to have stories to tell in interviews, because when you get to an interview, you've got to have something to say. And so if you listen to the breadth of experience that Kerry has to offer, you'll understand why this former policeman has been able to jump ship into the AFL. So stick around on how he went about building out his deck of cards, as he referred to it. Secondly, if you want to make the jump into sport, you need to know why you want to work in sport. You need to have a reason. It's not enough just to say, I love sport. So have a listen to how Kerry articulates how he is connected to what he does, and some of the stories about the impact he's been able to create. Incredibly special, and it's no wonder why he loves his job, and it's no wonder why he's been given the position that he's in, because he is so connected to what he does. And he's even built a ritual out of making sure he's continuously connected to what he does. I won't give it away just yet, but I think a lot of people are going to look out for it now after listening to this. And finally, have a listen to how he was able to transfer his skills from the police force into the AFL and venues. If you're thinking, I've got all this experience in another industry, I don't know what it has to do with the sports industry, just have a listen to Kerry and how he articulates the way that what he's built in one industry has set him up for success in the sports industry. So I'll leave it at that. Enjoy this chat with Kerry Gassner. Kerry, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Ruben. I actually am privileged to actually be sitting in this chair. I've watched quite a few of these over the period, so to be sitting here now is a bit surreal, but it's good. It's nice to be here face to face.
No, our pleasure. And I thought I'd better start by showcasing listeners how connected the sports industry is, and share a bit about how we came to connect.
Yeah.
So Nathan O'Brien has been the glue between you and I. Now, back in 2019, Nathan O'Brien was, I think, the 11th or 12th ever YouTube interview I did. Before there was ever a podcast, there was a very amateur YouTube channel. Nathan was a guest on that. You spent a year working with Nathan down at Cardinia Park.
Correct.
And 3 years after I chatted with Nathan, we bumped into each other at the Grand Prix, had a coffee after that, and he said, Ruben, there's this guy who I think would be perfect for your podcast. His name's Kerry Gassner. I spent a whole year travelling to Geelong with him in the car. He's got some great stories. He's got an incredible background in the police force. You have to get him on. So I'm glad that we finally reached this moment.
We did meet this moment, and that YouTube is one to watch for those who actually want to go out and watch that YouTube clip for Nathan's sake. So he'd be quite embarrassed to be able to hear this. But no, brilliant. Absolutely. I think stories about and connecting is about what it's got me to places where I never thought I would be. And I think to sit here and do this, I think, some of the work that you do with Sports Grad is just amazing. And that's what it's all about. So
thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. And thank you. So.
Another thing that we have in common, Kerry, is our shared appreciation for empty stadiums. So when I was at Cricket Australia, one of the best parts was being able to go into the Hugh Trumbull Cafe at the MCG, flash your staff card to the MCC security guard, and go and take your lunch into the stand, and you'd be the only person sitting there in a 100,000 seat stadium. Now, I believe you have a similar ritual before each of the events that you work at. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
I do. It's probably it is probably one thing that keeps me connected, and then it actually just for some reason, and don't think of it of a weird one, of actually just the aura of actually being in an empty stadium is quite amazing. So Hugh Trumbull Cafe is always a good one to do, and I'm starting to get my team from M&OPT to go over there and experience something different. But to sit in a stadium for me is probably one of the most best experience you could ever do, and it doesn't matter whether you're at the MCG, John Cain Arena. I used to do it at Yangwan Stadium up in China when we were putting a game up in the middle of Shanghai, wondering, an AFL game, wondering what are we doing up here, but how amazing it actually was to do it. So for me, it's been the one thing that has always grounded me in the sporting side of things, whether it's been, professionally or personally, sitting in an empty stadium either before or after, and before each and every show, whether it's Harlem Globetrotters at John Cain Arena or whether it's a grand final, when my time at the AFL, just one of the best experience you could ever have, I think, just to keep you grounded and makes you feel pretty privileged to be in the positions that we do in the sport. So,
and not just sport as well, like entertainment too. I believe the Foo Fighters you were
correct,
privileged to be able to see. I know that they just had a tribute concert to Taylor Hawkins over at Wembley.
Yep.
When did the Foo Fighters concert come through you?
Well, that was right place, right time. But one of the you've got to be in the right place. But we got a call. So I was at Kardinia Park early this year. So I've only just moved across to Melbourne Park now. But the start of the year was at Melbourne Park, and we got told that we're going to have our first concert. Pretty exciting for the team down there. They're a brilliant team, and Kardinia Park is certainly going some places. And we got word that we've got our first concert, and never had a concert down there. That venue's never held anything of the like. It's always been traditionally football, but we were told that the Foo Fighters were coming on the 3rd of December, which was quite amazing in itself. We don't have a ticketing build. We don't have how we're going to get people in, how many people we're going to put on the floor, all those sort of things. So that was all good and well until at such stage the CEO and Jerry Griffin, who's there, and also Natalie Valentine tapped on my shoulder and said, "Can we have a chat?" That 3rd of December date, what if we were to say that they'll be here in 3 weeks? So we're sitting there and I doubled. No, that can't be right. How can we put on a concert of that size with 3 weeks? But sure enough, it actually was 3 weeks. So it was very much a partnership with Always Live and the kick-off and the bounce back of entertainment within Victoria, and there was a lot that sort of sat behind it. But nonetheless, it was the Foo Fighters were coming to town in 3 weeks. So I was part of it. Very fortunate to be part of a team that sort of led the whole planning and delivery of the first ever concert at Kardinia Park, but then we also sat there, a day out, 2 days out, and listened to a sound check, and there's the Foo Fighters in Geelong, which was, to be honest, amazing. You can't beat it. But they're the experiences now. I mean, that will go down, I think, nearly in all of us, the small little team at Kardinia Park that we were all part of to put that show on. But there was a moment where I sat in the stands the night before. Actually, Nathan will attribute it to this, that it was pretty close to 2 a.m. when we finished the ops plan and everything. We just sat out there and we were just sort of taking the whole thing in. It was just dead quiet, and then you just understand what's happening in 24 hours is quite amazing, and the amount of work that's gone on, from our team, but everyone else to actually put the show on was probably one of the great experiences, you could ever have in sport and entertainment and working in venues. So pretty cool story. And I've got a son who just loves Foo Fighters, so having him on FaceTime for the first song was probably one of the great experiences you get to you get to do. So yeah, pretty good.
Amazing. Well, they are obviously an international sensation, and to be able to grace Geelong is pretty rare in itself, and to be able to stand on the stadium beforehand is pretty special as well. Now, you weren't always working in sport.
No.
To add a bit of context to this conversation, I want to go back to your early career in the police force, where you spent 15 years there.
Yep.
And then a lot of people think about jumping over to the sports industry, and you managed to do that straight into the biggest organisation in the country, being the AFL. And now you've gone on to... You went on to Kardinia Park, you went on to Melbourne Olympic Parks, and looking after John Cain, which I'm pretty sure Nick Kyrgios has said this is his favourite court in the entire world to play on. You mentioned some of the other shows you've looked after as well. But tell us a bit about your time at the police force. What sort of things were you dealing with back then?
Good question. I was always going to be, destined to be a policeman. I grew up in a policeman's son, in a policeman's family, I should say. And I did interstate truck driving out of school. I didn't go to university. I didn't have that pathway that sort of traditionally a lot of people that I went to school with, and did furniture transport. But, that was always, I'm going to join the police force. So furniture transport, I thought it was going to be for 18 months, thereabouts, lasted 7 years. Absolutely loved it. On my P-plates, driving interstate trucks up and down the highway. But then there was a period of time when it was, I really want to chase my dream of becoming a policeman, and followed suit. So I did 15 years with Victoria Police. I was pretty destined to want to become a detective. I certainly didn't want to go to traffic management. I'd sort of, I wanted to go to the air wing at one stage, but couldn't hold my breath underwater for long enough. So that one sort of slipped away pretty quick. But I really had a passion for, going to become a detective. I think, look, there is a connection between my dad. He was a detective, those sort of things. So these things sort of, when you're young and in your 20s, became at the forefront. So, you work hard, and I started out at Ringwood as a constable and became a detective at Preston really young in my career, and then was able to transition into the crime command. So I worked at the Piranha Task Force for quite a while, not in the murder side of things. So just to put that out there, but certainly came in at a period with the Piranha Task Force, which is well known. That led to experiences with 2 years spending with the Australian Federal Police on a couple of investigations there, and then I had a real passion to go to the homicide squad. It is one of those things when you're in the policing world, and I know we're sitting in a sporting world, but it's not too dissimilar where you've got, a dream and you're sort of looking to chase that. And I ended up at the homicide squad, which was where I always wanted to go, was sort of where I thought where you can make the biggest impact. You're dealing with people at their worst, obviously, but it's probably one of the most powerful places you could ever work from a human connection side of things. So, you've got that sense of belonging and purpose, and and dealing with plenty of different people, different stakeholders, different, whether it's the OPP and the Supreme Court, the Coroner's Court, but a lot of it was about the people.
For those who don't know what the homicide squad does, could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so basically the homicide squad, and it's still in the same form now, but are responsible for attending and investigating all suspicious deaths within Victoria. So
wow.
I don't want to go into too much detail here. It'll probably scare some of your listeners away. But, look, in essence, it's, obviously you're looking at, anything from a homicide or a suspicious death that needs to be investigated on behalf of the coroner. So there's, it's pretty broad. There's no doubt it's one of the most fulfilling jobs you could ever do. It's very dynamic. Operationally, you have to be very switched on. Strategically, a lot of those sort of things really come into play. You're dealing with people, and people at their best, their worst, people that aren't quite nice. Obviously, sometimes the offenders that you deal with are, at a totally different level from normal society. So, you're sort of confronted with those. But it's, from a team environment and those sort of things, probably one of the best teams you could ever work in. I mean, it's a very close bond, between your teammates, and you have to. I mean, it's just it's an elite part of it. You're very much charged with the responsibility of finding answers for families and those sort of things. So yeah, it's and I still hold it very dear to my heart, and still one of the best places I could have worked. And to be honest, I wouldn't be at John Cain Arena if I didn't have some of those skills that I learned through there and gained that perspective there. It just it really ties in really nicely where I've ended up now. So.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can't imagine how stressful some of those situations would be. I'm sure you probably get used to it and you start to...
You do.
It just becomes part of the job after a while. I'm not sure if that's right in saying that or not, but...
No, it is. It's a process. You're following a process, but you've got a huge responsibility to the person, to the families, and to the people. And that's where you get a lot of your motivation and your drive and your commitment to what you do, but your decision making has to be spot on. You're making decisions, split second decisions that are going to be played out in a Supreme Court or a Coroner's Court 2 years later. Nice. So there's a lot of responsibility there to answer for some of the actions that you've done there. And when you're dealing with the family at court, and they're looking for guilt, and they're looking for the right outcomes in a court sense. It'll never bring back their loved one, but you do hold a responsibility there for them to provide the answers and do the best job that you can. So, yeah. Wow. Sorry, we're at Sports Grad.
Yeah. I know. You're dealing with serious stuff, which is very, very eye-opening for someone like myself who's just been around sport, and we've got to put on a match today, or we've got to, for us, it's just running a podcast, and then to hear about your experience with these suspicious deaths is quite the contrast. So now you mentioned to me that because we previously caught up for coffee, it was awesome learning all about yourself before coming on here. You mentioned that you always thought the sports industry was completely unachievable, but you managed to make that jump straight into the AFL. So what was the moment, or when did things start to change for you that you thought the sports industry is an option for me in the future?
Brilliant question, because I was very much heading on the police path. So you do, quite a lot as a leading senior constable and, homicide squad. You sort of hit a stage in policing, and you become a sergeant, then you become a senior sergeant. So there's a trajectory and a pathway within policing, and I was certainly heading down that way. And your question in the sliding doors moment in relation to that, that we prepared prior to the today was basically a coffee with a good colleague of mine. We've had some health. We're very connected by a couple of health things that we've both had. And he said, "Hey, I work in the Sporting Integrity Intelligence Unit," which was a very small unit within Victoria Police, but it really is. It's a very unique one as well. And he says, before you become promoted, and this was on the way out of after I've just done my sergeant's exam, so it literally is on the day that I'll tick my box and I'm off. I'm out of moving up. And he goes, "Why don't you come and spend a bit of time at Sporting Integrity and Intelligence Unit?" So it's part of, basically it's very much a stakeholder relationship unit that works with all the sports, so Racing Victoria, the AFL, you've got the Australian Open that comes in here that are treat, the Tennis Integrity Unit that comes in from overseas for the Australian Open and our larger events. And it is basically set up, given that we're the sports capital of the world, but just a brilliant insight into sport. Now, in my personal life, I had a real passion for baseball, working at, I was doing a lot of coaching, the Australian Pathways, ABL, the Australian Baseball League. So I had this passion of sport, and you go back to venues and those sort of things for a very long time. I've just had this passion of sport, loved it, never thought it'd ever be attainable to actually be in it. So I said, you know what, and I said to my wife, I said, I'll give this a go. I'm a long time promoted, so went across to the Sporting Integrity Intelligence Unit. Very much looks at anti-doping and corruption and a lot of those different things that impact the integrity of sport, which I think are pretty well known. But over time, it was really good to have the relationships. You're really being exposed to stuff that in Victoria Police, you're not exposed to relationships, and you're not exposed to building those relationships. And over that time there was an opportunity to go and have a coffee with a former colleague that I worked at the homicide squad that was at the AFL in the integrity and security department there. And, just started inquiries and start that network. And, so you start building this network and you realise, hey, it'd be pretty cool to work in sport. Imagine if you could actually bring your passions together. And I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts of recent times, and it's such a common thing that everyone sort of says, imagine you could bring, what you know practically in your professional life and what you're passionate about and bring it into one. How cool would that be? So that just started the thought process of maybe it is achievable to be able to work with sport, but that would never have happened if I didn't have that colleague come and just tap me on the shoulder and said, come and work there. And it was actually, I was going there to work with him. Just a great opportunity to work with a colleague that I'm really close with for different reasons. And that started the path. And then, going straight into the AFL, I probably didn't realise how significant it was, given how hard it is to get into the sporting industry, when an investigator of the integrity role came up at the AFL and said, nah, you know what, I'm on my way to policing. And there's a common thing in policing, the golden handcuffs. You've got 9 weeks leave, you've got superannuation, you're set for life, those type of things, real steady employment. But I made the brave, it was a brave decision. I spoke to a lot of people before that, people who had made the jump, and it's a big thing to leave policing, and I was given a great opportunity to go to the AFL, and off we went. So
in making that decision, what was the defining factor, if there was one?
Gut instinct, to be honest. It was a big decision. You look at, I've got a young family, Morgan McKenna, my daughter and stepdaughter, Millie, and your wife, and, you're putting yourself out into the, I suppose, what's the real world, because policing's quite a confined world. It was going with a bit of a dream and taking that passion, bringing it together and say, you know what, this is worth it, and I'd had some, there's a couple of other things in a personal space. I had a quadruple bypass when I was 34. So your perspective just changes over time. And it's sort of like, well, imagine being able to do something that you love, do it well, and be in an environment like the AFL, which was, I took the jump, basically. Yeah. Just you've got to be brave enough sometimes and make the jump.
So it sounds like you've been through like this really thorough decision-making process to change, to make it quite a drastic career change, because you've got everything set up for you.
Yeah.
Do you remember the day when you got the call from the AFL to say, Kerry would love you to be a part of the team?
Yes, vividly. And it was probably I was going to say one of the better days there, because I look back at that day now. I mean, at the time, it's excitement. Yep, can't wait. I'm going to get an AFL jacket. I'm going to go work at the AFL. I had no idea where it was going to lead me. And that's, sometimes you just don't know where the end's going to be, but you take that initial step, and then the opportunities that opened up, of where I am now, would never have even thought that. So the significance of that day now is probably profound on my sporting career, where I sit now, and in a very privileged position to work at Melbourne Olympic Park. And that day there and that phone call was good, and coming in and shaking their hands and getting my brand new AFL jacket and a nice polo, and didn't have any branding on it, which I was disappointed at, but it was just some, the AFL got a long way to go with their branding on there. Don't know that, but but that was the day that it started me on my journey now, where I could actually realise the dream of bringing your passion and bringing what you know, and transferring those skills into a whole new world. So, and
did you keep your composure on the phone, or were you in all sorts? Who did you tell first as well?
I had to ring my wife first. Had to do that if I didn't do that. But no, I was with a couple of guys that knew the AFL side of things from the Sporting Integrity Intelligence Unit at that stage. Goes, why are you doing this? Why do you need to get out of a Vic poll? You've got all this set up. And I'll say, well, I'm going to go, give it a go. They're incredibly supportive. But, a lot of people, I remember handing in my resignation to my, to the Deputy Commissioner at the time. He goes, why would you want to go to such a place as the AFL? You're set up here. And, it was actually you're sort of taken back at the attitude. It's sort of like, instead of well done, hey, this is a good reflection on Victoria Police, that we've got people that can add value out in the real world, and you're always welcome back. It was like, what are you doing that for? And I was like, well, hang on, just here's my resignation. Sort of put it on his desk and walked out. So, yeah.
Gosh. That role, though, of integrity and security, it seems to be quite a natural path for people who've come from the police force to jump into sport. Even when I was working with the T20 World Cup, I was the team liaison officer, but every team also had a security liaison officer.
Yeah.
And the two that I was working with were both police women who had taken a few weeks out of their job to follow the New Zealand cricket team around with us.
Brilliant. Yep.
Why does that skill set in the police force fit this integrity role so well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because integrity, we won't go down the rabbit hole of integrity, but there's sort of two people that really fit into the mold. There's the policing, the operational, they're having the ability to investigate, to knows that, understands the accountability required to investigate, and, and in the sporting sense. But there's also the lawyer side of things, so the legal side, and and you can look at every integrity, the Essendon saga, all those, how legal and complex it actually gets in that space there. So policing, some of the transferable skills with policing are, you're really good operationally. You have skills that that you can always look for risk well before it comes up. You have the ability to speak to people most of the time, because that is some of your core job. So policing, in an operational sense, you have to be very planned and prepared, and you have to be accountable to everything that you do. So a lot of those skills actually fit really well in the sporting sense as well. If you're doing, you're speaking to a suspect in a policing sense, or you're speaking to a player in an integrity sense in the sporting world, there's not a lot of differences, but you have the ability to build that rapport. You understand the process. There's ways of being able to, to achieve outcomes, through under a good structured process. And there's a lot of that now. I don't interrogate people, and I'm certainly not in venue managing now, but there's ways that you can talk to people, build relationships, and policing has a real unique way of doing it, because basically that's what you have to do. So
yeah, I also remember I used to have the desk right in front of Sean Carroll's office, who is the head of integrity at Cricket Australia, another former cop who kind of fits that mould.
Yep.
He always had the door firmly locked. You always wondered what on earth is going on inside that room.
Yes. Sometimes you do. It's, policing side of things. I've got a head for it. Everyone still thinks that I'm a policeman. I've got no hair, and I still look like one, but he's a good man. He's, and you look at his path now and what he does, it's a brilliant role. But yes, sometimes old habits die hard from a policing sense, keeping everything locked. And absolutely.
So you made another jump from integrity into venue management. In terms of that role, what does your day-to-day look like now?
A lot different than what it did in 2015, that's for sure. But no, look, I have I'm in a very privileged position to work at Melbourne Olympic Park, and I made that transition about 3 months ago from Kardinia Park, where I was given another great opportunity in that space there. But now John Cain Arena and part of the Melbourne Olympic Park is we are, from a government sense. So we are, we're a government entity. The Melbourne Olympic Park Trust is reports up to the sports minister and those sort of things. But I think it's it's very well known that Melbourne Olympic Park and everything that it offers is very much at the jewel of venues within Victoria or Australia and even internationally, with the Australian Open side of things. So I'm one of 5 venue managers now that basically oversees a brilliant team, a front of house and a back of house team. Your front of house with your 2 event managers and an event coordinator that do a lot of the heavy lifting and planning of the events, and then a back of house team with basically pulling down, converting the place from a basketball court to a stage to a concert back to a basketball court, all in the space of 3 days. So they're a brilliant bunch of men and women who work in our venue team, and they're part of a wider network of part of Melbourne Olympic Parks as well. So there's just it's an incredible place to work, and when you I'm still learning, and I'm starting to see the true breadth of what the park actually has, and heading into my first Australian Open will be quite amazing. So I have a privileged position of leading a brilliant team, and John Cain Arena is it's the workhorse venue of Melbourne Olympic Parks. We got anything from the NBL to with the Melbourne United, South East Melbourne Phoenix seasons. We have the Vixens and the Magpies in the Super Netball. We've had international basketball, we've got international netball. We've had, I don't know the bands. I know Liam Gallagher, he came through a little while ago, but we have a range of bands. I think
it was Gang of Youths there recently.
Gang of Youths is at Rod Laver Arena.
Rod Laver,
yeah. But we had Glass Animals, we had Young Blood. I know we've got for the older people, we've got the Offspring coming up, and then we've got Flume coming through our venue. So it is just a diversity. And then we're starting to look forward to, the Australian Open now. The second phase of the overlay starting to be presented to us. So the place transitions again. So it's an amazing position now to where I find myself. Very privileged, very thankful to be where I am. Busy.
There's a lot that comes through your doors. I think these might be Rod Laver events as well, but I recall going to a Melbourne Olympic Park show to see Fleetwood Mac, I think, came recently, and Jerry Seinfeld came a couple of years ago as well. Like the variety of entertainment that you guys host is incredible.
It's amazing, and that's a crowd. You've got Amy Park with, all your A League and soccer content and rugby league. Rugby union, rugby league. Rod Laver, had Kiss, had 4 or 5 shows with Kiss, with every bit of pyrotechnics and makeup that you could ever find in that place, which is just brilliant. You've got, Shaquille O'Neal came through Margaret Court Arena recently, and then Centrepiece.
Did you get to meet Shaq?
I didn't meet Shaq, no. We're too busy over at our venue. This is the thing. It's sort of like, you want to go over and say good day, but no, I didn't get to meet Shaq, but I'll tell you what, he's impressive fella from what I heard. So, yeah.
What kind of strikes me as interesting about Melbourne Olympic Parks Trust is that it seems to be the centrepiece of, or the glue that makes Melbourne the sporting capital of the world.
Yep.
Because you've got the MCG, you've got Marvel, but it's really that tangle of 4 or 5 different stadiums that host the Australian Open, that host the basketball, that host all these different variety of events.
Yeah. That
kind of join the MCG to Amy Parks, to everything else that kind of creates this incredible landscape photo of the Melbourne Sporting Precinct.
Yep.
And that's driven by Melbourne Olympic Parks. And you guys are right at the centre of creating this status for Melbourne as a sporting capital of the world. That must be quite an incredible thing to
It's amazing. Yeah, and look, from a personal side of things, it's a privilege, and I know a lot of people talk about privilege being in where we are, but it is, you do look at it and it's, it's iconic, and then you can't discount the fact that there's an Australian Grand Prix just down the road, and you get that snapshot and you go, how does Melbourne actually do this? We're just Melbourne people, right? And we are literally a destination place for major events, and, to be part of that and right in the middle of it, I'm incredibly excited. You might talk to Nathan, who's done 9 Australian Opens, and the people at a TA and within, they're going here it comes again, but can't wait to be part of those sort of things. We're very lucky. We're very lucky in Melbourne to have what we have.
You mentioned how your policing skills correlated to the integrity department skills. How do they correlate to the venue management skills that you need?
I think it's perspective now. So, I'm certainly out of the days of interviewing and investigating and doing those sort of things. But, there's, one thing that, we speak about, we're certainly within our team and those discussions that we have is about perspective. There's nothing that we can't achieve. And, with the experiences that I've had, I think, your threshold of understanding of, okay, if that's the worst, I've seen the worst. And it's not to say that I implore that on the team at all, but it just gives you the ability to, if the team are feeling a little bit stressed or quite, there's things that aren't working, and there's plenty of that goes on in venues and events. Is you're able to apply a bit of perspective or a bit of a calming influence. Operationally, you sort of have, a bit of nous about you, and those are the skills that you bring across from the policing. And then there's the accountability, like workplace safety. We've got, as I said, close to 80, 90 tonne of lighting that has to come up and down. We've got stages and all those things. So you certainly understand the risk and those sort of things as well. So there's a lot of transferable skills that policing have taught me that, to be honest, to walk into venues, and I haven't had the traditional path of, some others that have come into venues there, but there are skills there that, are valuable.
When you say perspective, I'm picturing Kerry Gassner in the middle of Cain Arena with, say lighting's just coming off the roof and everyone around you is going, oh my God, this thing's going to fall, whatever.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind when you've come from 15 years in homicides and dealing with suspicious deaths and you've seen it all,
yep, and
now you've just got like a bit of loose wire? Like, what goes through your mind when something goes wrong now that you're in the sports industry?
It's a good challenge because you've got to hold yourself back because you sit there and go, what can go wrong here, but in a lot of ways you've got to trust the team in relation to that, the safety side of things, and a lot of it's preparation. And policing was very good. You had to prepare for everything prior to. So if you have the ability to influence your team in good preparation, those sort of things that you sit there, you do sit there with just going, is that right? But I learn a lot from the team. Our team are, and the people that come within, and put these things up, you learn a lot. And, reverse mentorship is something that I really believe in, and, asking questions. So I become curious again. How does that sit? I sat with their operations manager last week, empty stadium, and they're lifting, 80 tonnes of truss and lights up there, and I'm asking him everything about it, and those sort of things. So, having the ability, so that's good for him because he gets to explain and understand. It gives me comfort that he knows, the thresholds. He knows the compliance piece. He knows those bits and pieces. And so I don't sit there and go, what is going on here? I can't bear to watch this because I know what could go, in your mind, what could go wrong. So, yeah, so there's, it works both ways. Sometimes you got to hold yourself back and level yourself out because, I think you do look at you look at things totally different from what you experience, but you find a balance, and I think that's that's a good challenge. It's something that I'll try and work on.
Yeah, I can imagine you'd have a really, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I reckon if I was working with you, I can imagine you having a really calming influence on the people around you.
Hope so.
Just through the
You'll have to ask the team. No,
maybe. Yeah. But is that something you try to help other people with when you can see people are stressed out? Yeah,
it is. It's leadership, and I think for any person even coming out of university or at any stage of the thing, if you have a real good passion to learn in the leadership side of things, and it's always an evolving skill that you're trying to do. But that leadership, absolutely, you want to provide them a calm and a good environment, and that's something that I know that I can do while I'm still learning a lot of things. That to give that calming influence to them, I think is really important. They work at their best, and I think as I said, perspective. I can sort of see you can work through stresses. There's a lot in the background, obviously, with events and venues that people do not see, in the hard work, and a lot of it you don't get paid enough for to do. But the people that are very special in building these shows and putting on the experiences, it's hard work. It brings friction. It brings frustration. It brings a whole heap of different things, whether you're tired or anything like that. So I do look. I'd love to with the position that I hold now, provide a great environment for them to succeed, and you get them to understand their connection and their why and why they're doing it, and just give them the perspective. Hey, come down a level. Let's work through a problem. There's nothing we can't fix. So
I think you mentioned at the start of the episode that you were sitting in the stands at 2 a.m. at Cardinia Park before the Foo Fighters. So I'm guessing that speaks to the hours that you guys work in events. So it's probably no surprise that if you're working through till 2 o'clock in the morning and something goes wrong,
yep,
it's hard to expect everyone to keep their cool.
Correct, 100% it is. Yeah, but I wouldn't ever wish on anyone putting a concert together in 3 weeks. But you're right. I mean, you sometimes you're sitting there going, "Well, there's no sleep." But I think that's pretty well known around the industry. And I think how you'd manage that. The show will always be delivered. It's at what cost and how you get there, and the preparation and how how your team responds and how they work together, and providing that is the real key to success, because ultimately the success is joined within the team, because the work that's been put in and you see the smiling faces at the end of it. So,
in terms of like the rostering or the hours you guys work, how's that changed between when an event is close to going live and when it's in planning mode? And I know a lot of people would listen to the hours that I'm guessing you're going to mention and think that's ridiculous. Like, as soon as it hits 5 o'clock, I'm out of here. So what sort of schedule do you have, and do you like it? Does it bother you sometimes? What's it like?
Personally, I'm okay with it, because you come from I've always worked in shift work, and getting called out at 3 in the morning, and that disruption, I wouldn't recommend it for a longevity, believe me. But events are very similar. I mean, there is periods, and I think one of the keys, for all our teams, and when you're dealing in that space, in the event space, is knowing when you need to push, and knowing when there's a good opportunity to recharge and do that. And there are hours now, like we're coming into VSSS. There's the hours have slowly increased over the last week and a half, and our team are we're starting to work shift work. I mean, we do have the luxury. I mean, this is some venues don't have the luxury of having resources, and we're very blessed to have resources at Melbourne Park where those hours. So you might be working. Our operations team are working till 2, 3 in the morning at the moment. With all the lighting, production, and all the back of house things that need to be fixed and set up for the actual show. So the hours become a lot. I mean, I think and then it's an understanding that, next week we've got a week and a half before the NBL, or a concert leading into the NBL. There's a really good period to recharge. So you do have that flexibility, and I know a lot of people talk about flexibility post-COVID, but you can work from home if you're doing settlements and that's. I know that's a real big focus of the park now, from management and those sort of things, is learning, because events are coming back. Content's coming back. We're making up for 2 years of lost content, and it's only just going to get busier and busier. So it's a real challenge now for us to be able to manage it, but there are long hours that do come with it, and it's how it's managed that's going to be the key. So,
I've heard a number from one of our former guests and friend of Sports Grad from Spark Event Group, whose name is Geordie Miles, Managing Director. Yeah. In his early days.
Good podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
He was good. I like that one.
Excellent. I'm glad you like that. You might remember, he said he worked, I think, like a 32-hour shift or something. He was working at White Night in Melbourne.
Yep.
Did some ridiculously long shift, then got called into something else, decided it wasn't worth going home to sleep before his next shift continued on.
Yep.
And it just kind of like broke him after that.
Yeah.
So when I hear stories like that, and even some of your experiences too, it's like, wow, the events world is crazy at times.
It's dynamic, and but you've got to celebrate your wins. You've got to, that Foo Fighters show. We're an extremely small team down at Kardinia Park, well led, and to be honest, a lot of the cultural aspect of that actually got us through that, because that was pretty stressful. But that was, there were 30-hour days going in. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say 30. There's not even 30 hours in a day. 30, there's time because you're in it about it, but you've got to celebrate the success. I mean, being in that privileged position to put on the shows and give the experience, some of the best team moments you could ever have out of doing that. But you got to, this day and age, you really do have to look after your staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does break you if you're not careful.
I want to talk about mentors for a bit, because you mentioned the bloke who helped you helped open your eyes to the possibility of sport whilst you're becoming sergeant. Is there anyone else who's helped you at any stage of your career with where you are now?
And hopefully good fathers. I'm going to mention the father. I know that's an easy one, but he's been a brilliant person that's, just always supported. And I think it's reassurance. And, I've heard in a couple of other podcasts sometimes with mentors, and I think it was the CEO of Champion Data that I listened to the other day.
Libby Owens, yep.
Had a great comment in relation to what mentors are. You need to do most of the work yourself, but a lot of the times you're just seeking the reassurance. Am I making the right decision? Am I doing it right? And that reassurance just keeps, that allows you to take yourself to the next level. And, Jared Griffin and Natalie Valentine down at, Cardinia Park, I can't underestimate, for me in the transition into Melbourne Park, what that period was down there and, and what it is. And, I know, you can always pick up the phone around those because there's some brilliant knowledge around the venue management side of things. And now as I step into Melbourne Park, there's some really good people in there. There's an Andrew Travis that sort of sits there, a huge amount of experience. Danielle Bleasby, who I report into now. You just get all these different perspectives. And I think, each and every one of them, as every opportunity comes, some mentors might fall away because, I don't use people that I really respected in the police force so much around that advice. You sort of move, as a transition through the different phases to where I am now, is having that good network and the ability to reach out and ask questions, be curious, and have that. And a lot of the times your curiosity, I know if someone comes to me curious about things, you're like, yeah, I want to help, and you want to do that, and you become that mentor type person to it. And a lot of people have helped me to get to where I am, and it's, I would never underestimate. Mentors are incredibly important. They just come in different forms, and I think one bit of advice is always be open at every bit of advice is an opportunity, whether it's good or bad, and it doesn't have to come from one person who you just totally respect and love and those sort of things, but each and every one just plays a little part in relation to providing that perspective or where you're travelling and reassurance, which is pretty important. So,
just on the topic of getting advice, what's the feedback system like when you're at the police force?
Yeah, that's a good question. Depends who you ask. Got to be careful with this one. Feedback's really good. There's policing is a brilliant profession, and I would still recommend it as a job and those things. Now, the feedback can be quite hard. There's policing is a paramilitary side of things. So you sort of don't sit in that military environment, but you also sit a little bit, you'd have a rank structure, and there's always that sort of feeling, he's above me, and, what's your registered number? Feedback comes in plenty of different forms. There's a lot of good people now and policing's shifted as well. The understanding of leadership and the true leading of men and women, I should say, is incredibly important now, and has become a focus, whereas previously, it was very, yes, sergeant, no sergeant, salute, those type of things where it can be quite difficult. And I think in a society that we live in now, leadership, and there's, there are brilliant, I think Victoria Police in some part are really starting to transition to that. And there's a lot of legacies, with policing that come with it, because it's a very unique side of things. But it comes in different forms. But saying that, each and every experience that's come on now, it's sort of, it plays a part for sure.
Yeah, I was interested because we've heard a lot about feedback in an elite sporting environment. Say at an AFL football club, it's pretty hard and fast. You get used to dealing with that. So interesting to hear how it's delivered in the police force. And is it delivered better now that you're working in sport and in an office? Or
I think it is. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're working at a totally different level, and I think there's some brilliant AFL has some brilliant leaders within it. I mean, people have their own judgments around different areas of it, but it is the environment you do. It can be quite direct at times, but sometimes that direct feedback delivered in the right way and articulated in the right way. And I think, since I've been in this phase of my career, the people who I really respect deliver it and articulate the same message, whether it's instead of coming over the top and being that real direct way, which can just crush people, because you've got to be really mindful and empathetic to the other person. We're people first before we are venue managers at the moment. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you listen to the podcast. I'm interested in your history of the YouTube channel, because the very first interview I did on the YouTube channel was with a guy called Jim Kaler. He spent 9 years at the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yep.
And one of the first questions I asked him was, what do you look for in graduates when they're applying for jobs with the Cleveland Cavaliers? And he went on to say a lot of good things, but then one thing to avoid, and that was when we see the super fan coming through the door, we get nervous in a hurry. So that essentially, we don't want people who just love sport. Don't come to us if you just love sport. And one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times is having that connection to your events and having that connection to why you do what you do. And so I'm interested to hear what's your connection to the sports industry and the events and your job at the moment.
Yeah. Connection for me goes back to truck driving, and where, you're responsible for someone's furniture and you're making that's the word. Moving house for an individual can be one at a time that is really important to them. Policing is very similar, and you work through those different periods. And homicide, at homicide, you have that connection, and you're working for that person in that sense of direction. And in sport now, you have the ability to impact their story. Now, whether that's part of your team, but the attendees and those sort of things, my connection to that is, it's a lot of self-reflection in relation. If you look at all the different career changes, or the three main career changes that I've had, is always been centred that I really enjoy providing people with experience. Now, that's just come in different forms for me. And for now, what we do, we put a smile on a young girl's face who's come to her first netball, just to see her hero play there. We go to the glass animals, and that's a totally different demographic, but there are people sitting in those just absolutely loving it, and you see those smiles. And one of the real things that I implore on our team is every event is go out and listen to a song, go watch 5 minutes of play, and just sit there and look at the smiles and what you actually do to get that connection, because that's what you draw upon when it gets tough, those late hours and those sort of things. So that connection there, and for me, that's the important part, because you lose that connection in the industry that we're in. I think you lose quite a lot. You lose the privilege, a sense of how much you are making an impact and how much you are bringing enjoyment to someone's life. And it could be, I had a lady at, and I'll keep this really short, but I had a lady at Cardinia Park at Food Fighters who was coming in on a walking frame. Can I get you in? It's just an opportune moment to get her in and out of the crush. She had her son and 2 daughters there. They were in tears. I said, "Is everything okay?" She said, "Yeah, I've got cancer. This is the last opportunity for me to go away with my family." So I said, "Well, come in here." And I took her right up to the front of the stage, or to the front of the floor, and gave them those sort of things. But for me, that's she's now passed away, but that experience for them means most. It's not about what we did, but Foo Fighters meant so much to that family, and that's one out of 32,000 people. So you've just added, you've had the ability to provide an experience for them that it's individual, and that's where I get my connection from, and that's where now that I've have the privilege of leading a team and those sort of things, is always understand the reason why you do it, because it'll be different, but also your connection to why you do the space, work in the space that we work in, which is, as I keep saying, it's privilege. It's amazing.
That's amazing. I think it's such an important thing, and it's really cool and inspiring to hear that you've made that a ritual as part of your work.
Yeah.
Part of your work isn't just to get to work on time, it's to go and connect to the stadium beforehand, because you've mentioned longevity a lot of times. I think you're right. It is easy to get burnt out in the sports industry.
Yeah.
And as you say, if you just spend all day, every day looking at the run sheet and thinking about what's happening at what time, you forget about what you're actually putting together. And that's an amazing story that you've been able to share with us there.
That's brilliant. That's why we do it.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to share some final pieces of advice, and to kind of add a bit of connective tissue to this. One other great thing that Nathan O'Brien has created from all of this by introducing us is by leading me to you.
Yep.
I've been able to connect you to my mate Darcy,
and
which has just been incredible timing, because he's a great friend of mine, similar age to me, been in the police force a few years, and is having similar thoughts to what you've been through about, I want to change to the sports industry.
Yeah.
And so to be able to connect him to you, and from what I heard, you had a 2-hour conversation to help him with what he's dealing with, which is just amazing to think about.
Yep.
And, before recording this, you shared that you've connected him to other people at the AFL. And so look forward to catching up with Darcy at some point to hear how that's gone. But I'd love to hear from you, what were some pieces of advice that you gave to Darcy that might be able to help some other people out there who are thinking about making a career change?
Good question. Darcy and I spoke. It was a great intro. He is brilliant person, and to your listeners and those sort of things, but a really good centered head on his shoulder, really good perspective. So we connected really well. So he's I'm sure he's a brilliant friend to you, but he's a little bit nervous about leaving and making the jump now, whether it's policing or any career move. Me to go to Geelong, living in the eastern suburbs in the base of the Dandenong, the ride in Geelong. It's a decision. They're nervous. You got to go with it, but ultimately it can assist you, and you need to balance things up. But I spoke to Darcy. We're just sort of building the broad base of capabilities. People can go. We've got a graphic designer in our events team, and she did a University of Graphic Designing, and now she's leading our events team. There's so many different pathways, but if you build and look at every opportunity as an opportunity, or every moment or incident, and it doesn't have to be, it could be the small thing. And I spoke to Darcy around, in policing, you get to work, you can volunteer to work at a football match or a cricket match, and be that policeman that walks up and down the aisles. But that there is an opportunity for him to understand venue management. How does a major event work? How does the the structure and all the different things that come with? There's an opportunity to learn, and there's every time you get an opportunity to build your deck of cards, you just never know when you're going to deal that card. For me, there's quite a few different things. So it's a personal thing, but and this was advice that was given me. Just building a broad base of capabilities gives you the opportunity to deal when you're ready, and it opens up opportunities. So there's a huge part around networking and having a great network and having all the different things that come with it. But being a good person and advocating and those sort of things, but building a deck of cards, and it could be from anything from being able to talk to someone or investigate something, all the way up to putting a trust up. Everything's an opportunity. I never thought, working up in Shanghai for the 3 years for that AFL match that no one ever cared about, but that gave me some great perspective in relation to international events. It opened up international events like the Formula One Grand Prix in Japan, those sort of things. Everything's an opportunity. I got offered, do you want to work at this event? Yes, I do want to work at that event. Volunteering so much. I went, in my baseball side of things, I met Billy Bean by volunteering in that space and got over to the Oakland Athletics and did a coaching internship with them. So every opportunity, but each one of them now play a part in where I am. So building your broad base of capabilities, building your deck of cards, because when that opportunity arises, you've got something to deal and put it on the table to say, a prospective employer and say, yeah, what I can bring X, Y, and Z. I might not be the traditional person, but I can bring this, and this, and I wouldn't be here if that didn't work. With Andrew Travis and the people at Melbourne Park that gave me the opportunity to where I am now. So
you were doing all these things whilst you're working the police force. You kind of had your day job, and then you're doing these wide-ranging things around it.
Policing, during the police force, I've been part of baseball all my life. That's just been, it's like playing footy. But I was coaching state teams, which led to MLB academies doing some scouting and working in there, and that sort of opened up opportunities to go to the States and spend that time with with Oakland Athletics. That now, some of those coaching and meeting some of the people in that organisation now, you're just meeting different people in different perspectives. It's leadership coaching is the same, but you can transfer that into now. The study side of things, doing my, an MBA. That's why I wanted to stay out of the police force. I needed to build those skills in the background from a sporting business side of things, and did my MBA. But that takes you to Real Madrid. That takes you to spend three weeks at Real Madrid and those things. But they're all little things that you start learning, and you start building this capabilities. You understand the worth of brand. I mean, Real Madrid is the biggest brand in the world, and you're learning about brand. How good is that? Those little opportunities that you do, you just start building them, and then they're the stories you start telling in your interviews, and they're the things that start giving you the confidence to take the next step into whatever sporting career you do. So it's hard. I've been rejected in areas, and the AFL sort of you want to get to certain things and opportunities don't arise, but over time, the bigger, broader base of capabilities, you can make your way. You can get there.
I love what you said about they're the stories that you share in interviews, because ultimately it's the interview that gets you in the door.
Correct.
And you got to have something to say.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I loved about your story is that the extra activities that you're taking on outside of your job just don't stop.
Yeah.
You've got to have this body of work to be able to present. You've got to have a story to tell at the interview.
Yeah.
It's not enough just to do one thing and expect that to be enough.
Yep.
And what's really interesting to me, having talked to a bunch of different people at different stages of their career, is that doesn't change.
No.
So we had a conversation with Brant Hubber, who's just got his first job. He's been working at the AFL in a customer service role for a little while,
Yep.
but just got his dream job in the commercial partnerships team.
Yeah.
And he's only, I think, 22 or 23. And when he laid out his resume to us, it was just like experience after experience after experience after experience.
Amazing.
So he's got heaps of things to talk about. Another example is Carlo Kasparian in episode 20, way back when he started volunteering at the age of 29.
Yeah.
One person said to me during university, when should I stop volunteering? And I said to him, well, when someone gives you a job. And so I think a lot of people think, I should only volunteer until I, am a certain age or at a certain point.
Yeah.
But then you've got people like Carlo who are like, I'm going to put my ego aside and get out there and volunteer because what I want is a job in sport.
Yep.
He's now the general manager of digital and marketing at Football Australia.
Amazing.
When the Socceroos qualify for the Qatar World Cup, it's his team who's creating the TikTok videos of Andrew Redmayne doing the
I saw that. Yes, amazing.
Doing
the
the goalie wiggle and the final save, like one of the greatest moments in Socceroos history.
Absolutely.
He's the person at the helm.
Yep.
And he's gotten that opportunity because he's volunteered. And so to add to these array of people who are doing all this extra stuff, you've got yourself who's made this amazing career transition based on all the extra stuff you wanted to do too. So I think that's great advice to leave on, that you've got to build out your deck of cards because you need to have something to talk about in the interview. And you're an incredible example, Kerry. So
thank you, Ruben.
It's been a pleasure to have you on this podcast.
No, absolutely. And congratulations to all the work you do. I love what you do. So you and Ryan. It's awesome.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kerry. I absolutely loved connecting with Kerry when we first caught up for coffee. So to have this conversation and flesh a few more details out of him was incredibly special and insightful. And we kept chatting all the way down the hallway as he left the studio. But a couple of things to take away from Kerry. Number one, if you are making a career change, ask yourself, what does your deck of cards look like? Should you be doing more? Can you be doing more? Is what you're doing at the moment enough to present to someone like the AFL and say, hey, this is what I've got to offer. Can I have a job? You heard the array of experiences that Kerry built up over a long period of time to make that jump into sport. Having that deck of cards and a wide variety of cards is incredibly important. So can you be doing more? Are there opportunities in grassroots clubs, in charities that you can take on to build up your experience to say, hey, I've dealt with all these different situations. I mentioned our friend Carlo Kasparian. At the age of 29, he started volunteering for the Chelsea Football Club Foundation. So there might be charities out there, there might be grassroots clubs, there might be a mix of both that you can put your hand up for and volunteer your time, because that experience is what ultimately counts at the end of the day. Secondly, learn to be able to separate your skills from the industry. So you heard Kerry talk about all the different things that the police force was able to provide him. He was able to articulate that to the AFL and say, I've learnt this in the police force. This is how it can help me in the AFL. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because we come across a lot of people who say, I've never worked in football before, or I've never worked in cricket before, or I've only got a background in engineering or IT. Does that still count? And in some cases, we'll see their resume and they don't even include their experience from 5 or 6 years in another industry. So I think the important thing to take away from Kerry is that all of your experience counts. It's all about how you articulate it. So definitely don't remove the experience that you've had, because that's part of your deck of cards, but learn to be able to say, hey, the things I was doing over in engineering, they actually correlate really well to the sports industry for these 3 reasons. And then if you can articulate why you want to work in sport, and if you heard Kerry talk about his connection to what he does, then that's going to be the kicker that gets you the job. If people can clearly see the skills from another industry transferred into the sports industry and how they match what's on the job description, and then if you can tie a bow around that by telling a story about why the sports industry is important to you, then you're going to be hard pressed to be knocked back by anyone. So There's 3 things to take away from Kerry. If you're making a career change, build out your deck of cards, learn to separate your skills from the industry, and finally, learn to tell your story about why you want to work in sport. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to dive into a couple of other episodes, I think one you'd enjoy is one with Carlo. He was episode 20 way back at the beginning. Also, I mentioned Nathan O'Brien a number of different times. He's on YouTube. We should get him back for a podcast episode, but he was one of the very earliest YouTube interviews. So if you search SportsGrad on YouTube, you'll be able to find that interview there with a very awkward looking Ruben Williams. Otherwise, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Send us a personalized note if you enjoyed this episode. We'd love to chat with you there. Otherwise, join plenty of other people trying to find a job in sport in the SportsGrad community. If you want to connect with people in the sports industry, jump over to there. To join, head to www.sportsgrad.com.au/community, or you can head to the link in our show notes to join. Also, if you love the show, we would love it if you left us a review, left us a rating, 5 stars, preferably, if we say so ourselves. Otherwise, make sure you follow on Spotify and subscribe on Apple to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.